Ladies and gentlemen, before we jump into today's video, I just have a question for all of you. Raise your hand if you like Magnus Carlsen. Put your hand up. Hey, pay attention. Put your hand up. I know you like Magnus Carlsen. Keep your hand up if you like Anish Giri. And keep your hand up if you've ever played against a bot. All right, fantastic. Regardless of how long through all that your hand was up, or maybe you kept your hand down, today's video is going to cover Grandmaster Anish Giri in his adult form versus Magnus Carlsen in a 10-year-old bot impersonation. This is from a clip that they did as part of the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour when the Grandmasters participating would come and play against the Play Magnus bot. Now, at 10 years old, Magnus's rating at the beginning of the year was 1,600 when he actually turned 10, and at the end of the year was 2,100. I mean, when you're the GOAT in blooming, no one really knows what your rating is. But this was an absolutely fascinating game, so we're going to look at the game. But also, I am going to talk a little bit about the fact that why I really think you should practice chess against humans. Bots have a very weird way of playing the game, but that's neither here nor there. Let's jump into this game. So for this game, the Grandmasters were given 2 minutes. They were given 2 minutes to play either a victory, or you either have to win in the shortest amount of time possible and shortest amount of moves, or you have to draw or lose in the longest amount of time possible. Probably you have to draw in the longest amount of time possible. Losing is bad. Anish goes for a London. The London is a good system to play when you don't have a huge amount of time. And also it's just good to play period, as some of you know. But against something like a bot, because every move is very easy, and the bot can't really do a whole lot against the London. That's just the truth. So the bot plays a couple of normal moves. Knight f6, e6. Anish plays bishop d3. And already the Magnus robot plays something a bit ridiculous, which is the move c6. I mean, there is no reason to play that move. Like, white is immediately 0.6, 0.7 advantage, because black has two ways of fighting against the London. The pawn going to c5, or the bishop going to d6. So when the bishop comes here targeting this bishop and the pawn goes to c5, that is the way black is supposed to fight back. When you allow white to get everything he wants, which is dominance, control of the center, white will then implement the various London game plans. The most important of which is, of course, planting his knight in the middle of the board, which frees up the king side, as well as opening the queen, and then you can launch an attack on the enemy king. The Play Magnus bot plays bishop d6, and here Anish plays an interesting move. Normally, when I see these bishops like this, I tell people to rock back. The point is that you want to get this trade and open up your rook, and this can just be very devastating if black castles directly into this attack. So the rock back approach is good, followed by knight into the middle, and the stonewall setup with the move f2 to f4. That's why you bring the bishop back, so that then you can play f2, f4. Anish here plays knight d2. Knight d2 is an interesting move. The point is that if black takes this bishop, positionally he's in trouble. White gets really good control of the center. You don't really need to worry about this. You can just defend it with g3, and when you castle, you're totally safe. Your king is completely fine because black can't move. I mean, black c5 is a move for sure, but this structure is known to be completely fine for white. Which is why Anish plays knight d2, the Play Magnus bot plays queen e7, and the general rule of thumb in the London system is if white dominates e4 and e5, white will just be much better. So if white does not allow black to enter on e4, white is going to be doing very well. If white then puts something here and holds it there, white's going to be doing very well, so white plays the move knight e5. Now, you would think here that black would play knight d7 or maybe knight f d7 or castle. No, black plays c5, which is what I mean. Bots are stupid. No human plays like this because you've already committed your pawn. Again, because the bot just sort of spat out a random move on move 4, it allowed white to get a situation that normally they wouldn't, because the thing is, if you've moved a pawn 1 square in the opening, you almost never move it again. There are obviously exceptions. As people like to do, they're like, well, what about in this opening, Gotham? Yeah, that's like 1 in, 100. This is just not good. If you wanted to move the pawn to c5, you could have done it on move 1. You could have done it on move 2. You could have done it on move 3. You could have done it on, well, not now because you already did it. But okay, the bot plays the move c5. Now, again, Anish is following good rules of thumb. In the London, when you see c5, you go c3. This is what I used to teach my kids. c5, c3. Not like my offspring, but my, kids in the chess program. I would say in the London, c5, c3, almost always, because you just want to regroup your center, and also what this does is you can slide the bishop back, because, imagine a situation where you accidentally lose a bishop. So c5, c3, and now the computer wastes yet another move. It now plays queen c7. What's funny is that this setup against the London with bishop d6, queen c7 is good when it's not played like this. It's very good when it's played like, you know, c5, knight d2, bishop d6, and then, you know, queen c7. Like, Magnus himself has actually played this kind of setup, so is Wesley So. So, yeah, I mean, the computer plays queen e7, then moves the c-pawn again and moves the queen. And yet the computer's not really much worse because the London is not a world-ending opening. It's just a good opening. So here Anish plays queen e2, which now he can play because the bishop can get away. This is a very flexible move. You don't know which way you're going to commit your pieces yet. You're waiting for black to do something, and black does do something. He plays a very obscure move, which is knight fd7. Again, wasting another move. So he's moved 3 pieces 6 times in the opening. 2 moves with the queen, 2 moves with the knight, 2 moves with the c-pawn. At this point, as all the pieces are congested, you really could begin looking at various attacking ideas, like, for example, queen h5. But again, Anish has like a second to make every move. So he's trying to keep it simple. He just kind of regroups in the middle. One of the benefits of having played the move bishop back to g3 and rocking back is that this will always run into f4. I love this stonewall grip on the center because you just open your rook if you ever castle, and this is just so nice. It's so nice. And the next thing that comes is queen g4, queen h5, attacking ideas, cracking open the center. This is super, super strong. And in general, like, if you want to attack somebody, you want the center to be rock solid. Unless you have like bishops that want to look across the board, right? So that's why I like bishop g3, because now you don't get to play with the pawn. You have to kind of bring the knight, which is fine, but I like my, you know. So knight e5. Now here Anish takes with the pawn. Yes, he's doubling his pawns, but now the black bishop has to move again. So now the queen has moved twice, the c-pawn has moved twice, the bishop is about to move a second time, and the black knight moved 3 times. The black knight went to f6, d7, took the knight. Right, so black is wasting tons of time, which is why white is now up about 0.9. However, that doesn't mean much. 0.9 is great, but how do you actually win the game? And Anish actually tries to win the game immediately. Yes, he can castle, but he plays the move h4. h4 has one very nasty idea behind it. The nasty idea, can you spot it? Short castles, white to play and win. That's why it's plus 10. h4 is a very useful way of landing a Greek gift sacrifice. So Magnus would not blunder this. Bishop takes h7, kaboom, and then you bring the knight, and the knight brings in the queen, but most importantly, you open your rook. So now you have the rook in the party. See, if white had castled, white would not have this rook on the h-file, which is why sometimes in the London, it's good to delay castling just a little bit. Right, so Anish plays the move h4. The machine here can play the move h6. It should not castle. It just develops a knight, which is not a bad move. Now Anish has a tough decision to make because he either has to castle or play h5. If he plays h5, then there is no longer a Greek gift because you cannot activate your rook, right? So just one pawn square is all the difference. The bot here plays a6, clearly setting up intentions on the queen side, kind of disregarding Anish, and Anish walks the pawn all the way forward to h6. So this approach by Anish, h4, h5, h6, very trendy nowadays because generally in a position where you don't really know if you want to crack everything open without changing a whole lot, like what white is doing here. White's not changing a whole lot. He advances the h-pawn, and black absolutely has to go here. Black cannot take the pawn because what happens is you suddenly arrive and you've made it into the position. You now pressure everything. You've given white a pure VIP pass to beat the... I was gonna use words that I generally don't use on YouTube. That's only reserved for Twitch. Yeah, you don't want to... Yeah, rook h6. No. G6, though... Yeah, that's what you force black to play. Now, there are a couple of benefits to this. Number one, in all endgames, this pawn is terrible. So that pawn, you can get to it, that h-pawn's going to queen. Also, very weak dark squares now. So if the king ever goes this way, there's going to be tactics. Like, the other thing when you have a pawn like this and a pawn like on h6, that pawn could get through. So there are going to be positions where a sacrifice on g6 will force the pawn out and then you'll queen. This pawn's very, very well protected. So Anish plays a3. Again, not committing too much, waiting for the bot to do something. Here, the bot really should do something. The bot should play b5. The bot should take advantage of the fact that Anish has sort of frozen his own attack and create its own attack. It should play b5, queen b6, bishop d7, rook b8, and advance on the queen side. That is really what you should do. And you'll notice that neither side has castled. Yeah, because the center is so closed. The kings are not very close to being attacked by one another, right? So bishop d7 is a move, and Anish here plays king f1. You could tell from Anish's, this is not a mouse slip, by the way. Anish does not want to remove his rook from the file. The thing about king f1 is that Anish is not really sure what his next move is. That's the honest truth. Like you could go b4, which he actually does on the next couple of turns from now. King f1's just a kind of a quick move to play. Pass the move back for a second to the bot. Maybe you're going to put the king on g2. You don't know. It's just a move that in a position like this, you can actually afford to really make because the position is very closed. Admittedly, though, the bot, of course, can begin counterplay with something like knight a5, c4, and now knight b3. Knight a5 would have been quite annoying. Like if Anish, again, just tries to play over here. Here comes knight b3. Here comes c4. And actually, black is almost better. I mean, black, well, according to Stockfish, black already is better. But from a human standpoint, I'm not really sure you can make that argument. It's a very frozen position. But it's very, you know, black is actually doing something rather than just sitting around waiting to be trampled. So at this point, the bot does what all bots do. At any given moment, depending on the bot that you're playing against, which is why I tell you not to play against bots, bots basically are programmed to go complete Ooga Booga mode. And it's very different Ooga Booga mode than when an 800 does it, or like a 1000 or a 300. Because when humans go Ooga, they might Ooga for a move. They don't just play unbelievably obscure moves for like 3 or 4 turns to lure you into to an attack and then just immediately counter you. You have to remember, a bot will play perfect moves anytime at once. That's the advantage that it has over a human. So when you train against a bot, it will do something really dumb, like 4 moves in a row, and then it's going to catch you with the most perfectly timed counter straight to the jaw. I don't know how we moved from chess to getting punched in the face, but that's the problem with bots. Humans don't do that. Like once a game is trending in the wrong direction, it will usually just go that way. So here the bot plays bishop d8, which if you offered me a lot of money, I would not be able to explain. Again, it's just basically making a move. Anish plays b4. The bot castles. That's actually not a bad move. So b4 is an interesting idea here by white. The point is to take space on the queen side. That really is the point, preventing knight a5. You're not seeing the bot play this move now. There was a difference when the knight was here. Here's the thing. When you lock the center like this, you kill your own play. So black here would need to rely on b5 and a5. But imagine a situation where this became the position. Black has no play on any side of the board. Black sits and waits for white to arrive and decide where to break through and how to win the game. That's it. That's really all you're waiting for. So that's not any good. And the other point is that it could get even worse. You could accidentally lock yourself out completely. Like you can lock your knight, bishops completely out of the game and be totally lost. So that's why b4 is such an interesting move. And black castles, because Anish is not trying to take this free pawn. That is a poisoned apple. If you take this pawn, you completely destroy your structure. And after knight a5, you've given me a green light into your position. And nobody can even guard this. You have all these beautiful pieces, yet they're all garbage. Okay? So, you know, queen takes c5 is coming, and I win my pawn back, and you know, so b4 is really more of a space battling type of move. So Anish here plays queen d2. Again, it's a pass back move. It's just a pass back move. That's just, I don't exactly know what I want to do. The bot takes. Now, if I were to ask you here, which is the correct recapture, A or C? Right? A or C? Which one is it? Some of you would say A because you're supposed to take toward the center. You're not supposed to take away from it, right? In this case, it's actually C b4 because you get the C file for the rook. And that's it. I mean, your pawns do a nice job. The other thing is AB, although it does get a file for your rook, there's nothing there. It's an imbalance of pawns, which you don't really need. So you do this, the pawns are now AB, AB, and you have the C file, so you're in good shape. So again, here the bot goes complete nonsense mode and plays rook a7, which is an incredibly stupid move. Anish obviously finishes moving his rook. Now the bot plays 2 really idiotic moves. Queen c8, which, again, the eval goes higher for white, but it's not clear how to exactly take advantage of this, right? So Anish plays another passback move because he's only got about a minute and 30 seconds. So he's just like, all right, and now queen a8. I mean, what? In the middle of the game, the rook and the queen sneak off somewhere, you know? Like, what are we doing here? What is this? I don't know. That, like, oh my God, what's going on? What's happening? You know, so now obviously the evaluation is at its highest point, and Anish, actually being a very good chess player, well, not actually being a very good chess, he is a very good chess player. Anish, he understands that when the queen has kind of like wandered off, it's most principled to attack where you kind of face the action, right? He would attack on the king side, but there's nothing he can do. So he plays e4, trying to take. If this is just great, and also this rook just gets trapped, like bishop e3. So d4, the computer tries to hold it down, and now you need a way into black's position. So the center is totally locked. The computer here likes this move, knight h2, but it's not with the intention to play knight g4 and knight f6. It's actually hilarious. The intention of knight h2, if this is attacked, is to play like this. But then, like let's say king h8, it actually wants you to play bishop g3 and f4. The computer thinks that white has so much time, he can still get the f-pawn involved. That is how good the position is. Anish is a human though, so he moves his bishop forward to try to trade, with the obvious intention being to play, you know, queen here, queen mate. The computer plays queen b8, Anish plays queen f4, and he's looking to do this. So if Anish gets one more move, he's gonna go here, and black is going to be completely out of options. And this is where the bot strikes, with the move f6. That is an amazing move, a well-timed move, a move that does not look possible because it simply looks like it loses a pawn. But because of the dynamics of the position and everything, Anish has to take, and now we enter a position where even though he's better in a middle endgame sense. Why is white better? Okay, white is better because of this pawn, right? In the long run, there's liabilities over here. Black is stretched a little bit thin, and white just has more active and smarter pieces. Like this bishop on d7 is garbage. This rook is going to have to come back. And this is now a thorn, and you lock that thorn in with e5, you're just much better. Black will play bishop d8 and simply be out of moves. And now the bot gives Anish a chance, plays bishop e7, and simply blunders a tactic. Bishop e7, you now will lose 2 pieces for the rook. Why? Well, believe it or not, what Anish plays isn't even the best move. The computer likes takes, and then taking the pawn. The computer wants Anish to get into an endgame just a pawn up. Rook h4, rook d4, just up a pawn, no counterplay for black, still liabilities over here as we described. However, rook takes c6 is really appetizing, and now you get 2 pieces for the rook, and you are completely winning. You are completely winning. I don't even know what the computer wanted here. Oh, it wanted this, and tried to argue that black is not lost. So rook c6 takes rook c3, and here Anish has a knockout punch. Finally, the bot has succumbed, and a long time ago I told you all that there was this, right? So in this position, bishop takes g6, and white wins. White wins, because if hg, there is h7, h8. The reason Anish probably did not go for this is because there's rook c1, okay? And takes, and it looks like you can just do this, but you can't. Somehow, you still have knight g5, and this pawn makes it through with the help of the bishop. So that is why that h-pawn is such a pain. That is why it's such a pain. And that rook on a7 is not helping anybody. Absolute bozo over here, falling asleep in the bushes with his pants down, all right? So, you know, bishop e4 is what Anish plays. He misses this knockout punch. He's still much better, all right? He's still much better. Brings the bishop back to c5, and here he has to stay patient for one move. He has to play rook h4, which is what he actually said in the post game. He said, rook h4, this pawn's not going anywhere. It looks real scary, but you just cut the circulation, and there's no d2, because you take, and if rook c2, rook d4, that's it. Actually, not even rook d4, probably just rook f4, but they're both good, right? Rook d4, white completely dominates black. 9 times out of 10, the 2 pieces are better than the rook, which is what you have here, because it's just literally 2 things. They're 2 things, right? So you have 3 pieces playing in the game rather than black having 2 rooks. But Anish blunders, and the bot makes him pay immediately. Knight takes d4, and Anish misses the fact that he also loses 2 pieces for his rook. And now, even though he is very temporarily up a pawn, because he is completely passive in this endgame, he is in trouble. And so the bot checks him and goes to pick up a pawn. Anish here should play the move f4, which is, and then rook c5, and try to, like, get in. But the problem is that black is always playing good defense. So rook b3, and he does win the h7 pawn. The problem is, now it's 4-4, and even though he's very close to queening, This move, sorry, not this move, but this move gets the king over, and that's why actually Anish here has to play rook g7, apparently. That's what, like, rook g7, and then his idea to win here is to get the move f4. So, for example, a5, rook g8, h7. That is the way Anish is supposed to win. Rook g7, rook g8. I think after check here and like rook c1 trying to come down, white wins with the 3-on-1. So white overwhelms black with the 3-on-1. I mean, rook g7 is a tough move. And then rook g8, like this little close quarter king cutoff. But again, rook endgames, so it's all about rook activity and cutting off kings. The engine will give chances, right? So rook to a7. The problem is that now the king gets over to the h-pawn, and once the h-pawn falls, it's 3-on-3. But the challenge of this game is to play as many moves as possible. So we're going to shuffle through the moves. We're going to have a lot of like nonsensical moves here. But folks, just remember, in rook endgames, you have to really build around your biggest asset. I'm not saying in a million years would I have found this plan if I had to play it in 3 seconds. I'm simply saying that what Anish did was absolutely right. That h-pawn proved to be the difference maker at multiple points in this game. If we go back a couple of moves, there was a tactic, bishop takes g6, right here, winning on the spot, right? So that's winning. But even later, even somehow later in the rook endgame, you know, getting this rook g7 idea was crazy. But once that pawn falls, it's a 3-on-3. And the players play for some time, and Anish again tries to expand. There's a fake repetition. This is just a draw. But a little bit later in this game, the bot was doing some dumb stuff. So the bot, for some reason, lost its pawn, but blockaded Anish's pawn, right? So this is still a draw, because you can't bring the king closer, and you can't move the rook, and king and rook versus king and rook is not a win. But it played for a while, and look at what black is doing. Black is messing around here. But at some point, the bot even gets fed up. By the way, at any moment, the bot can go here and win the pawn. It's just not doing it, because computers are dumb. They don't want the game to end. They're like puppies. They're just like, no, I don't want the game to end. I'm going to keep the pawn there. And then Anish actually looked like, oh my gosh, he's making progress. But he's not. He's not, because king h7, king f7, check here. And now you could take on g7. But look at this move. Bots have a sense of humor. Rook f7, and you cannot take it because it's stalemate. Admittedly, if you go here, this will be taken. So Anish just, after rook f7, he took on f7. He forced the draw after 93 moves. And yeah, I mean, this is crazy, because apparently the Magnus bot is like, you know, in 1900, 2000 strength. And yet it defended against the Super GM. Now, the opening was not good. Hopefully you all learned a few things about the opening. This very interesting plan by Anish. The kind of pawn jostling on the queen side to take space. And at a well-timed moment when white black went over to the other side in the middle, and then slowly encroaching, and a well-timed counter shot, which is why playing knight h2, knight g4 is so important, to add another layer of defense against knight f6. Very interesting game, and only bots can really produce absurd games like this. Still though, rook takes c6, a nice move, you know, deflecting the defense of the bishop. If this, of course, then takes in this, or it takes in this, and this pawn. I mean, there were tactics, and that's why you know, it's good to keep them in mind. But hopefully you enjoyed the game. I very much enjoyed the clip of it. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the reasons I don't really recommend playing against bots, because they do some really, really, really dumb stuff, and then they play perfectly for like 40 moves. Draw agreed after draw forced after 93 moves.